Hi everyone, it's Shay Stedford here and I'm a tutor at ACM. When I'm not teaching here at the ACM, I am an electronic dance music producer, so I make drum and bass, house music, anything with a DAW. Today for this computer music article, I'm going to be showing you how to sample an analog synthesizer using the Contact sampler and turning a mono synth into a polyphonic synthesizer. So I hope you like it.
Hi there, it's Shay here, and today I'm going to be multi-sampling an analog synthesizer. Now, we all love the sound of analog synthesis, but we're often slave to the synth's capabilities and functionality. I'm going to show you today how to multi-sample your favourite analog synth and take it to a whole new area of inspiration and creativity. Now, I think it's fair to say that analog synths have a certain quality to them that soft synths don't. Many have tried to justify this claim, and many have been shut down very quickly by soft synth advocates, stating that synths such as Spectrasonic's Omnisphere, Massive, Serum, UHE's Diva, among many, many more, can produce the richness and depth of any top-tier revered analog synth. I am one of these advocates myself, but it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate a solid waveform from a sequential Prophet 6 or the bow-quivering low end of a Moog Voyager. It begs the question, why not have my cake and eat it? Why can't I use the raw sounds from a hardware synth and bring it into the world of endless possibilities? Before we do this, there's a few variables to consider. For instance, what synth should I use? Should I use outboard effects? For something like this, it's always a really good idea to sample a basic synthesizer, a synth that has power but not too many features, something with no menus or LCD screens and just a one knob per function design. So let's get stuck into it. For this step-by-step guide, I'm going to be using this Arturia Micro Brute. This is a monophonic, basic, one knob per function, fully analog synthesizer. The simplicity of this synth and its sheer power make it so desirable. However, it is very limited in its functionality compared to, say, an Access Virus or a Dave Smith's Rev 2. What we'll need to do first is record the basic waveforms from this synthesizer at a healthy level. So really you're looking at somewhere around -12 to -9 dBFS. So in order to do that, let's dial in a sound. So all I'm going to be using is the square wave here. Now I've initialized the whole synthesizer. So I've got an open filter with no resonance. I've got it set to gate mode, so there's no enveloping going on. I'm just triggering a note. And I've got all of my modulators turned down completely and just the square wave turned up. Now for the purpose of this, I've overdriven this square wave without using my brute factor. All I've done is added the full amount of square wave volume. It's always a really good idea to record from a C note, or in most cases octaves of C, if we're going to be multi-sampling. In order to get a good solid level, you need to monitor this. So let's have a look. So I've got a level meter here within Logic. Let's pull this down. And what I'm going to do is dial in on my Micro Brute a level of around about -12 to start off with on my basic wave. -12.5, I'm kind of happy with that. That's pretty good, because all we're going to be doing is adding more and more aggression to this as we go along. So we're going to be adding gain. So to start off at -12 is a nice healthy level. Now when you're recording, it's very important to know that you need to hold the note down for a long period of time. This is because you don't know what you're going to end up making with these waves. If you're going to be making very quick, short, stabby, attacky lead sounds, you don't need a long initial sample record. However, if you're going to be looking at making pads with this and maybe a long drone, you need a very long source sound. You're not going to be able to fake the length of this sound later on. So I'm going to record for 15 seconds or so. I mean, I'm going to count it in my head. I'm not going to get a stopwatch out. I'm going to count for a long period of time, and I'm going to record all the way down as low as my synth can go, all the way up to as high as my synth can go. But all I'm going to be doing is going in octaves of C. Okay, so let's do this. So there we have it. There are our recordings. Now, as you can see, we started off quite loud, and we've generally got lower and lower in volume as we've moved up in the octaves. Now, this is a normal thing. This is because there's not as much frequency in the higher ones. There's a lot more frequency information in our lower notes and our lower octaves because there's a lot more bass frequency. The higher we go up in octave is the less bass we have, which means that we've cut off quite a lot of the frequency content. Now, what I'm going to do here is chop up each of these different takes. So I have a region for each one, so I can name these regions and then bounce these out as my raw files. Now the best way I've found to do this, instead of going through with a scissor tool, is just to come along and find the remove silence. If this doesn't appear up in here, you can right click and customize your toolbar and then you'll see this down here. It says remove silence. Just make sure this is checked. Now when I press this, as you can see, it chops out all of my parts here, which is very, very useful. So what I'm going to do is press OK, and now I have my parts. You can see here there was one that doesn't need to be there, so let's just delete that. And now I have all of my different takes. So what I'm going to do now is name these up. So I'm going to go to my text tool, and I'm going to name this one microbrute underscore pulse underscore basic C minus 2. Now I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to move along. I'm going to paste this here, but call this one C minus 1. I'm going to move along. You can see kind of what's going on here. C0, and then we have C1, C2, C3, C4, and lastly, C5. You can go all the way up to C8 if you want to. However, just for the purpose of this, having generally 8 octaves of the sound is more than enough for this. So this is all our sound. So what we're going to do now is highlight all of these. We're going to go back to our standard tool, and I'm going to export all of these as new audio files. So we're going to come down to our export menu and export as audio files. Now what this is going to do is going to ask me where I want this to go. So first of all, I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to pick a new folder, and this folder is going to be called Micro Brute Multisample. And now what it's going to do is have all of these regions with these names within that. So let's put this in, export. Lovely. So that's our first lot of recordings. This is the basic of what we're going to be doing. Now we can start to get a bit more creative. This is where our multi-sampling idea comes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my original sound that I had before, which was, if I go back down to my middle, I'm going to take that sound, but now I'm going to add in a little bit of artifact from here. Now, what I'm going to be using is this brute factor. Now, this is basically like an overdrive kind of distortion, and it's throwing the standard wave into a circuit that will distort it and give it a bit of extra drive. I'm not going to be touching any of these pedals yet. This is just going to be our next row of recordings. So let's play around and get a good sound. See, I kind of like that. It's rolled off some of the top end, but it's given it a bit more depth and girth. So what we'll do now is we'll go through and we'll record all of these octaves exactly the same as I did the other octaves. I will fast forward this again just so you don't have to sit through and watch me do this. And there we have it. There are recordings. So what I'm going to do now is go back in, select this. I'm going to get rid of my silences. As you can see here, it's going to chop up all the bits that I have. Press OK. And now what we're going to do is name these up again, but instead of having this one called basic, this is going to be called driven. Now the next thing to do to make this a little bit more easy to navigate is I'm going to colour this up. With the shortcut Alt-C, it's going to bring up my colour menu, so I know that my driven are now red. So let's move on to the next stage. Now let's dig a little deeper and start to use some of these effects. Now the first effect I'm going to be using is this Electro Harmonics Hot Wax. It's a distortion and an overdrive pedal. This is a mono guitar pedal, and it has 2 distortion or overdrive-y style circuits built in that can be separate or blended. So I'm going to dial in a sound now, working from what I had from my last setting, so my driven setting. And then I'm going to record these in. So let's do that. Lovely. Let's go in again. Let's remove those silences. Excellent. I can get rid of this first one as it wasn't really doing anything. And now let's call this one Hot Wax. Text tool. Copy and paste the name in. But now we'll call this one Hot -2. There we go. Select all. Copy the name. And then name across. And now let's do another set of samples. So then these samples, I'm going to be introducing this reverb. Now this reverb is the Digitech Polara reverb. This is a very useful reverb, and it's a reverb that I've been using for around about 2 or 3 years now, and it's kind of like my staple outboard reverb. Again, very competitively priced, but very, very useful. I'm going to be using this halo setting, which is kind of like a shimmer style reverb that creates some very big atmospheres to it. But what I'm going to do for this first one is I'm going to leave the sound setting that I have on here and my hot wax, and I'm just going to be adding in a slight amount of this. So let's play around and see what we get from it. See, I quite like that sound. So now I'm going to go through and record all of my passes again. Again, I'll fast forward through this so you don't have to sit through the agonizing sound of solid C notes. And then once we've recorded this, we'll name this up Reverb 1 or Verb 1. And then what we'll do is we'll do another pass after that where we crank our reverb really loud. So the next section you'll see after this, once I've done these recordings, is straight into sampling. So I'm going to be opening up Contact. So here we are in a brand new Logic session. Now I've opened up myself an instrument here, which is a Contact instrument, and it's a blank instrument. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to double click in this grey area, and it's going to give me a brand new instrument, a brand new empty instrument. Now the first thing to do here is to click on the spanner just at the top left. Now what this will do is it will take you to the back end of Contact, which is where you can edit most of the functionality within any sample. Now this will work only if you have the full version of Contact. If you have the Contact player, you don't get to see this spanner, but if you have the full version of Contact, this is where you can really start to customize and manipulate your sounds. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate to my mapping editor. Now you can see here that there is no sounds in here whatsoever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my browser here, and in my browser I have all of my sounds here that I had recorded. So I've got all of my pulses from basic to driven, hot, verb 1 and verb 2 with all of their octaves. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to literally drag and drop them on this area here to the sort of size that I want to see them as. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab C-2 and I'm going to drag that down to all the way up, or drag it out, should I say, all the way to C-1. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this down so the majority, this only takes up this range of key, so this octave, but it also takes up only this range of velocity, this down here being 0 and this being 127. So I'm going to then take C-1, drag that here, let's make that all the way up to C-1. And put it down to around about the same area. We're going to drag basic C0, and we're going to do this for every single one that we have. And then what we're going to do after now is add in all the rest of them. However, my C1, C-1 here, is going to go driven from this area to this area, and so on and so on. So there we have it. That is now our multi-sample instrument. So if I play this now, the harder I play, the different samples play. So this is now basically what our multi-sampled instrument is. Now this is the basics. Now we can move on to really manipulating this and getting a different sound out of this. Remember, the main thing about this is the microbrute is a mono synthesizer. Now, because I've resampled this and multi-sampled this, I can now play chords up to the amount of voices that my sampler can handle. So now I can play a full chord sequence. Just with those sounds, which is kind of a big deal really. But where the fun starts is where you start to go in and add effects to this. So if I just scroll down here slightly, let me close my browser because it's just sort of getting in our way a bit. If I scroll down, you've got all of these areas where you can add effects. So I'm going to go onto my insert effects down here. And the first thing I'm going to do is look at my filters. I'm going to add in a low pass filter here. So let's have a look at this. So this is something that I can use to manipulate. Let's add a little bit of resonance here. Really nice. Let's go for some form of effect here. So let's get some saturation, tape saturator. It's always nice. That's pretty good. Let's move down to the bottom here and just give a bit more release to our overall sound. So now if I wanted to make, for instance, a pad sound, I'll have more of a pad style envelope here. Maybe open up that decay slightly more. Maybe add in another filter here, or just manipulate our filter here. So what I can do is I can learn a CC control with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the mod wheel. So my mod wheel is now controlling my cutoff. So if I play now, let's go further down. Really nice, kind of feeling that. Let's go to our last effect here and maybe put in some form of reverb. So we've got added reverb on top of what we had already. And that's pretty much it. This is where you can take it to wherever you want to go. You've got a host of all your effects with inside Kontakt, and you've also got all the effects that you have in the DAW that you choose to use. So you don't just have to use the effects here. So what I'm going to do is come up and save edited instrument. And I'm going to save this down here as a monolith. Now what this means is it saves both the patch and the samples together as one single file, which is basically like a Kontakt file. It is very, very important that you don't move the samples once you have put them where they are, or once you have located your samples. Otherwise all you're going to get is that error message saying that it can't find the samples every time you go to open it. So I'm going to have my folder here, my Micro Brute multi samples here, and I'm going to add the monolith in here, and I'm going to call this Micro Brute multi. So now I have Micro Brute multi, which I can call up whenever I want. So let's try that out. So let's go to browser. I'm going to get rid of this instrument, and now I'm going to try and find my monolith. Let's refresh our page, and now we have the Micro Brute multi. Now in order to find this nice and quickly, I can right click in here in my darker area where we double click to get our initial instrument, and it brings up this quick load and quick look area. So what I'm going to do here is go Contact User, and I'm going to drag and drop my Micro Brute multi in my Contact Users. So this is my user library for Kontakt. So now whenever I double click this, I've got my sounds there. I can always go in. I can always change these around and change the ranges of my areas here. So for instance, if I'm down here and I want my reverb version to come in a bit quicker, I can just change its velocity change. I can just change its velocity area, which is always very, very handy. It's something that I've found extremely useful, just to go in and change and just tweak a little bit, depending on the kind of sound that I'm making. For instance, how this one is a pad, if I play this now. And we've got ourselves a multi-sampled Micro Brute. You can take this as far as you want. You can take this and make it very basic, or you can take this to really intricate scales and then physically record every single wave note rather than having one octave spread across keys, because this will obviously change the tone. I do, however, kind of like the way that it does change this tone. I like the way that as I go up in octave, the sampler has to time stretch those notes, or has to time stretch that original source note, and I do kind of like the sound that I get from that. However, if you want to be completely clean and perfect and actually the sound of that wave on every single note, you can do this to every single note and record every note pass. Let's just have a look at this note just quickly so you can see what it looks like. If we go to the wave editor, you'll see here each of the sounds that I have. So that's my original basic, then I have the driven, then I have hot, then I have slight reverb, and then I have loads of reverb. So here I can go in, I can change the start point, the end point, I can reverse these, all for the different samples that I have in here. So it's very, very editable, and it's very, very usable.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to get any more information about this and you're interested in ACM at all, go to the website www.acm.ac.uk. Sign up for an open day because I'll probably be there to talk you through what we do here. Any information, it's all on the website. So sign yourself up and I'll see you then. Thanks very much.